Okay, let's talk about jotting. First and foremost, you need to understand that jotting is not a process that's designed to stress you out at all. Jotting is just joy in reading. And I will confess, it does take a little bit of time to get used to it. It does require a little bit of effort to put into the process. But the rewards are deep, and it's fascinating to be able to take something that you read and translate it into your own meaning and your own understanding. And for that reason, we jot. So in Mrs.Oelke's class, we do jotting two different ways. We use a sheet here like this. This is our independent reading workshop type of assignment sheet. And you would get one of these about every 6 or so weeks. Within that 6-week period, I would expect you to be actively reading and jotting based on whatever the prompts here are on the page. Now, each page has 5 prompts, but you get 6 weeks to do it. So if you were to budget 1 week to 1 prompt, then you would be doing pretty good with your time management skills. And it's okay if you need to shift that around a little bit. Sometimes it makes sense to do maybe one of the further prompts over here last or first. It's really all about what book you're in and where in your book you're at. It's also important to remember that these prompts that you're working with are universal. They will work with any book that you're reading, and you can read many books at a time. You could even do 1 book per prompt if you really felt ambitious. Hi. Let's take a minute to talk about jots and what they should look like in your reader's notebook. Remember that in my class, jots are not full sentences or full paragraphs, and they're definitely not summary. What you want to do with your jots is essentially capture your thoughts, and you can capture them randomly all over the paper. I want to show you a couple of examples from other students who, just like you, have learned the jotting process and have gone on to develop a deeper level of thinking about the text that they read. So one of the things that I want to show you in this particular student's jotting is how they use arrows to basically guide their thoughts and their thinking around the page and understand where they're going with their thoughts. Now, this particular student used Post-it notes. So they basically started off with their initial jot. Looks like this particular student was focusing on the climax of their book, right? And they were trying to understand maybe what was going on. So they picked a couple of events here. And then once they got the basic events down in their jots, that's when the new thinking took place. And you can see where this particular student had new ideas, and they're elaborating on sometimes how they see things going or not going in the story. I love personally when I see prompts like this that says, now I think they might know the situation, but they don't consider the other person's feelings. To me, this type of insight right here shows me that they're going beyond the text and they're starting to infer a lot more that's happening. And you can see by all of the arrows here that this student is basically tracing their thinking all over the page. They use this strategy pretty frequently, and you'll see that they do that all the time, and that's perfectly wonderful. This is a great example of jotting, and one thing that you want to make sure you notice is that none of this is a paragraph. None of this is a complete sentence. In fact, none of this is even close to an essay. It's just thoughts. This student has a little bit more of a different approach to what they're doing with their jotting, and what you notice is that there's a lot more writing In fact, in my opinion, this is too much writing. You really don't need to do this much writing on your page at all. The example where I showed you with all of the arrows and stuff is actually a much better and much clearer way to read the thinking across the page. But this student still does a great job of capturing the initial thought, the initial jot here and here, and then coming over here and elaborating with what they're thinking might be happening, okay? And they're doing a great job of adding in their thinking after the fact. This particular student does do a thorough job. But look right here, what are they missing? They probably could have taken this thinking just a little bit further and found some type of a thematic connection in their thinking. I think, in my opinion, this student did a great job of capturing the thoughts and going through and expressing it all, but they were too focused on too many details and weren't able to come back and pull out that theme. This would be one example where I would tell this student, hey, relax a little bit. You don't need to fill the page, and you certainly don't need to put in complete sentences and too much information. Try to pull out more meaning than anything else. And that would be how I would coach this student to correct or adjust their course when they're jotting. This particular student had a lot of growth in their jotting over the course of 8th grade. You can see how they started off basically collecting their prompts here, and they started to do some thinking around the prompts, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, and here we're getting a little bit more sophisticated. We're talking about a Ray Bradbury story. So here's the initial jot, and here's what's going on, and here's all of the thinking that's going around that initial thought. So this student is doing a lot of growing here, getting the idea that jotting is really more about collecting those thoughts, not about this writing process, okay? Then later on, this particular student has an epiphany, and they start really taking a lot of liberty in their jotting. This is beautiful chaos here, okay? They start thinking about the book that they've read, and they're thinking about the people in the book and how they're connected to each other. And so they started to kind of create this graphic representation of what they're noticing in their book. This is really great because this student did this without any prompts, without any help, without any clarification. This is how the natural thinking process kind of just evolves as you're learning to jot. Now, the one thing I would tell this student as they were kind of getting finished with this kind of graphic example here is to start pulling down into this empty space and adding some correlations or some thinkings using those amazing thinking stems that Mrs.Oelke has set out for you in the classroom. So this could go one step further, but honestly, it's still a really amazing example of how you can track your thinking while you're reading. This particular student actually started to have a lot of fun with these jots, and I'm hoping that you do too. Notice the doodles and the things that we're noticing with clouds. Remember, Mrs.Oelke loves clouds, okay? So this particular student is starting to get the initial thinking here, and then coming around here and starting to add in all these areas of new thinking. And you can see as we turn the page that this student is exploring a lot of ideas and adding in a lot of their own personality into capturing what they're reading. So this is actually really nice, and they're getting to some conclusions here where they're kind of making some associations and some thinking here. We're digging into theme and thematic thinking. This is extremely important in 8th grade. We want to make sure that pretty much everything we try to connect to through literature gives us some form of thematic conclusion. Here, the student is exploring the tension of the story, and you can see the initial thought is here, and here the jots are kind of coming off of there. That's perfectly great. Okay, and then here we have some exploring of the character motivation. And I love seeing the students get very creative in how they decide to start presenting this stuff. Remember, there's no wrong way to jot. It doesn't have to fill the page. This is a lot of writing, and it's not wrong and it's not bad, but what she's doing here is she's exploring this theme a little bit more in detail.
This would be something I would probably say to her, this could definitely be a long write, something you could take a little bit further than just the initial thought. And it looks like she's really already started to kind of do that already in her thinking here, which is great. And then look, she ran out of Post-it notes. So what did she do? She improvised. I love that type of thinking and that creativity. All she did was make a box. And then she used the same strategy to kind of go through her thinking. Isn't that great? These are just a couple of great examples for how you can apply jotting into your own reader's notebooks and your own reading practice as well. In this particular example, this student has taken out different quotes out of the book that they were reading. And then they went ahead and examined the quotes for personal meaning. They pulled out some literary elements. This person noticed that there was a simile here in the quote. And then they talked about what it implies and what it means to them. They're carrying their train of thought from one train of thought to the next. And oftentimes what really helps when you do this is to take a break from the jotting. Stop jotting after you get the initial thinking down, and then come back to it later and add new thinking. And that's what this student is doing by adding in all of these extra arrows and seeing all of the connections between the quotes and then what they're thinking in what that they're reading.
Another way that we jot in Mrs.Oelke's class, that's me, is organic jotting. Once you've gone through and you've done a round of the jotting with the regular prompts, if you do that well, I'm going to release you into the world of organic jotting. With organic jotting, there really isn't a lot of structure or rules. It's just a matter of getting into the habit of jotting as you read. The prompts here pretty much don't really have a lot of structure. It's more like a list of ideas and things that you could be looking for as you're reading. As you jot organically, the structure of those jots might take on any shape or form. I'm going to show you an example of one way that one student took creative organic jotting to a whole new level and decided to display their thinking for everybody to see. It's pretty impressive, and I want to encourage you to have that same level of creativity and don't hold back. You can have as much fun with this project as you want to.
This is a project that one of my former students did based on their jots. And if you look at it from far away, it looks like a very simple and sweet picture of just a vase of flowers with some books and a beautiful picture, maybe with a quote there. But if you look a lot closer, what you're going to see is the book that they read, the main theme that they decided to take out of the book. And as you travel up the stems and the leaves, you see where they incorporated all of the beautiful jots that they were able to take out of their book as they read it. And this is really, really above and beyond, but this is a student who actually felt like they were really getting a very deep and helpful understanding of their book. And this is how they decided to show their thinking in an art form. This is a beautiful way to take jotting into that creative realm.
The important thing to remember about jotting is that it's not designed to be a super stressful OMG kind of situation. Jotting is just simply gathering your thoughts. It's really just a matter of collecting your thinking and then trying to find new meaning in the things that you have collected. It's pretty straightforward, but I will admit it's a little hard to get used to at first. It's not always automatic thinking. Jotting is purposeful thinking. The automatic part starts when we're reading and we're automatically just thinking as we read, but we have to purposefully stop and write down those thoughts. Now, if you think about it, when you're reading a book and you're thinking about the book that you're reading, to take the time to stop and actually write down your thoughts could sometimes slow down your reading process, right? And I understand that that might be something that might frustrate you. But remember that jotting is not complete sentences. You're jotting thoughts, things that come out of your head, ideas, simple fragments of minutia and ideas. There's really not much more to it than that, okay? So don't get stuck or get hung up on the idea that when you're jotting, you have to pause for 10 minutes and write an essay, because it's not like that at all. Jotting is just capturing your thoughts and then very purposefully going back and rethinking about them to see if you can formulate your own meaning in what it is that you're doing.